When you think of a compact camera, you're probably picturing something like this. Ooh yeah, that's nice. Well, as much as this is a compact camera, so is this. This is technically a compact camera. It even shares the same Cybershot product line as some other more typical compact cameras. Only this one has a much larger sensor and a big prime lens to go with it. Let's take a moment to compare the Sony RX1 with an actual compact camera, this Canon Powershot G9. While the Sony RX1 is 12 years old at the time of making this video, the G9 is an additional 5 years older than the RX1. So they're actually closer related to each other than the RX1 is to modern day cameras. And while these are both technically compact cameras, they could not be more different. The most obvious difference you're going to notice on these two cameras are the lenses attached to the front of them. The RX1 has this very large, full-frame 35mm f2 lens, whereas the Powershot G9 has a fixed telescopic zoom lens, which takes us from an equivalent 35mm up to 210mm at f2.8 to 4.8 respectively. This difference in focal length and aperture is even more exaggerated when you bring the sensor sizes into the mix. The Sony RX1 has a full-frame 35mm CMOS sensor, which when we pair that with the full f2 aperture on the 35mm lens, this will give us a much more shallow depth of field in our images compared to the 35mm on the G9 when stopped all the way down to f2.8. Part of the reason for this is the size of the sensor that we have on the G9. This is a 1/1.7 inch CCD sensor from 2007. While this size sensor isn't uncommon in compact cameras, as you can see from this chart, it is significantly smaller than an APS-C sensor or a full frame sensor like we find on the RX1. These two cameras are hardly comparable on a technical level, but they both serve the same use case. So how do they actually compare for a compact shooting experience? I noticed this the other day. Only 10% of you watching my channel at the moment are actually subscribed. So why don't we fix that by going down and hitting the subscribe button? It helps out the channel an awful lot and it costs you nothing to do it. But anyway, let's get back to these compact cameras. If you really want a compact camera to have images with that kind of early digital look, then I think the Powershot G9 is almost the perfect camera for that job. Sure, there are other iterations of the Powershot line and other alternatives from Sony, Lumix, etc. And specifically with this camera, just tweaking the in-camera JPEG settings, you can get some really nice straight out of camera shots without the need for editing RAWs. So for me, the G9 is much more easy to recommend for the casual photographer who occasionally wants some pro features. You get the manual exposure control and a built-in ND, but you also have the simplicity as an option as well. Whereas on the RX1, it is much more a pocketable pro camera. While I do tweak the creative style on the in-camera image preview, I never really shoot in JPEG plus RAW. Typically, I'm just shooting in RAW on the RX1. When compared to the other more premium compact cameras in this fixed prime lens world, the RX1, despite its age, still holds its own in terms of being one of the more pocketable cameras that you can get in this category. In most dimensions, it's marginally smaller than the Fujifilm X100 line, but of course, this big prime lens doesn't do it any favors in the thickness department. Sure, the RX1 is more easily stuffed into a jacket pocket maybe, but actually the X100, we all know, is a fashion statement, so you can actually just wear it like a bag anyway, and people will think you're pretty legit. Whereas if you wear this, it is a bit confusing. Like, is it a compact? Is it a serious camera? To most normies, they won't know the difference. For me, the RX1 competes much more directly with interchangeable lens mirrorless cameras of a similar size. So you could look at earlier, smaller Micro Four Thirds cameras from Lumix, like the GX1, the GF1, or the GM1. Or you could even look to compact full-frame cameras like the Sony A7C II, which I'm filming this video on. Having owned the original A7C, the A7C II, and the RX1, these are the 3 smallest full-frame cameras that Sony has ever made. Now, of course, their intended use case is actually quite different, but how do they compare in reality? The A7C or A7C II's obvious advantage over the RX1 is the interchangeable lens mount. Like every Sony mirrorless camera, these support the E-mount, and this allows them to shoot on both full frame and crop sensor E-mount lenses. Specs wise, in terms of the resolution, the RX1 falls short of the 33 megapixels of the A7C II, but perfectly matches the 24 megapixels of the original A7C. However, it is obviously not packing anywhere near as much in terms of autofocus compared to either of these cameras. And of course, to bring up the A7C or the A7C II, we have to talk about video, because both of these are actually great hybrid cameras for photography and video. So if you are looking for that sort of thing in a camera that is small, the RX1 should not really be on your list. It technically does shoot full HD, but only in one codec, I think in AVC HD. But other than that, it shoots in like 1440 by 1080, I believe. But funnily enough, the video mode is the only mode in which the autofocus continuous is enabled. Only on the later models did you get an AFC toggle on the front of the camera, whereas on this one we only have AFS. But of course, video was never the RX1's intended use case. It is very much that specialist camera for the everyday carry street photographer. And speaking of the everyday carry street photographer, I've actually made a guide based on my experience of using the RX1 and shooting with it. This guide covers everything you need to know about the RX1, getting it set up, using it for street photography, and how to get the best images out of this camera. And I've actually got this available now on my website. And for the first 7 days of this video being live, you can use this code to save 20% off my RX1 guide and everything else in my store. But this is only going to be valid for the first 7 days of this video being live. So if you're one of the early ones, I encourage you to use it. If you're not, you may have missed out. But yeah, if you're looking at picking up an RX1 or you already have one and you want to learn a little bit more about it, check out that guide in the description below. The RX1 sits awkwardly between these pro-level mirrorless cameras and then the slower end of compact cameras. But even though it's far from being technically the best among many new cameras, it's still one of my favourite cameras that I've ever used. Having the image quality that this lens and sensor combination provides, paired with that leaf shutter that means quiet mechanical shooting, is just a dream come true. And really, it's disappointing that we haven't seen this implemented on other cameras. There are really only a handful of fixed lens, large sensor cameras that allow you to have all of these features in one package. I want to let you in on a secret. If full frame isn't important to you, or maybe even APS-C isn't important to you, and you're looking at something like the RX1 or the Fuji X100 or the Ricoh GR, you might have some more options than you actually currently suspect. There is a whole world of interchangeable lens cameras that are seriously small as this, and you can buy a camera body and a couple of lenses for the price of just buying this secondhand. And it's called the Micro Four Thirds mount. And one of the smallest cameras I've tested from Micro Four Thirds is actually this one here. Get tiny lenses for it on a tiny camera body, and it's a lot of fun to shoot with.